Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey. Welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Today, we are feeling a little long in the tooth.
Yes.
A little old, a little gray, a little less hair maybe. This is our...
How come you looked at me every time you said every single one of those?
No comment. But this is our 100th episode.
Yeah, 100 episodes.
That's a lot.
Back to our very first trailer we launched in January of 2020. Man, it felt like walking uphill in the snow both ways.
The trailer may have been even in December of 19.
Oh, it might have been.
Woo, pre-COVID. There wasn't even a pandemic on the
No one even
radar.
knew.
It was different.
So we're old from a podcast standpoint.
I mean, is that
episodes.
veterans?
Is it like dogs? Like it's every seven podcasts is like a year in podcasting world?
Maybe. That explains the gray hair.
Yes.
So yeah, 100 episodes. You are way older than me.
That's true. So
But it's all good.
more episode experience.
But we made it. We made it all the way to episode 100.
Yes.
So what's that make us want to talk about today?
Let's talk about
100?
living to 100. If our
Whoa.
podcast lived to 100 episodes.
Do the math on that. How many podcast episodes would we have?
Oh, man. So if we do one a week, 52 weeks, times 100 years.
Not 100 years. You only have like 60 more.
Oh, I think meant if the podcast lived to be 100 years old. Because that's easy,
I
man.
mean, yeah.
Just add some zeros onto the end of that.
We don't even need to get into the math.
5,200.
But the age, longevity and age is really the question we're talking about
Yes.
today. So the question everyone wants to ask is, how long am I going to live?
Yes.
And that has a big impact when it comes to finances and planning, and we're going to talk about that today, as well as we're going to break down why that is even a thought, because that wasn't a thought unless you're, Adam or Methuselah.
Yeah.
But now, now it...
Methuselah live a long time,
A little bit.
apparently.
He was a little bit of a long life.
Yeah.
So, let's kind of break down how long am I going to live?
Yeah. And why that matters, like you said, because, 100, it's a nice round number, but it's an arbitrary number when it comes to that standpoint, right? But people look at that as a century. That's a long time to live. It's, you can see a lot of change during that time frame to live
That's
for
right.
100 years. And so, what that matters to, though, from a financial planning standpoint is it's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
How long you live has a big impact on your ability to have a successful retirement. So let's first start with some stats. I know you like statistics.
I love them.
All right, so this is from an article from U.S. News, which we'll link in the show notes. But they are using data from the Social Security Administration.
Gotcha.
All right, and so and the reason why this matters, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but actuarial tables, those are just mathematical formulas that takes large groups of people and says, okay, what's the average life expectancy for this group? And then different companies apply that for whatever they're doing. So an insurance company needs to know that to know how much to charge you for life insurance, because they want to know how long do you have the chance of living.
Statistically, how long you're going to live,
And so these are important stats and numbers, but let's look at that. So a 65-year-old today can be expected to live another 19 to 21 and a half years. Why the range?
Male and female.
Men and women. Women tend to live longer than men, but somewhere around 20 years. So if you're 65, we're looking right around 85. That's kind of the life expectancy according to the Social Security Administration. But with that, they know that's the average, right? So some
Right.
people live longer and shorter. So, if we say, okay, let's look at that, about a third of 65-year-olds will actually hit 90. That's pretty good stats right there.
Absolutely.
And then 1 in 7 will live beyond age 95. So that's getting to that 100.
Exactly.
So those numbers point out how important it is to plan for that. And age, race, location, meaning what country are you in, your family history, wealth actually plays into that as well because of your ability to access healthcare and those type of things. So all that factors into where you land on this. Genetics is a piece of that. Let's look back. So that's not always been that case. So in 1960, the Social Security Administration said for a 65-year-old man, their life expectancy was 13 years as opposed to 19.
Yeah, that's a big... The 6-year
it's a 6-year
change
difference.
in 60 years.
Yep. And then a 65-year-old woman, their life expectancy was another 17 years. So again, that's kind of that. We've seen it extend outward, and apparently men have gotten a little bit longer because maybe we're just not making so many dumb choices.
I mean, I was thinking the difference between men and women is because those extra 4 years back in 1960 or the extra couple years now, the women's lives are a lot less stressful.
You think so? Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll go with that. I think it has a lot to do. If you think about the 60s, it was more of a male-dominated workforce.
Right.
And if you think about the workforce, I mean, there was smoking in the office. You're probably exposed to a lot more health hazards.
I'm going to talk about that later. Don't go too far into that.
But I'm saying the 60s, that's why men have made such a longer extension of their life expectancy than the women.
We've seen Mad Men.
Because they've cleaned up their habits better. Women didn't have those bad habits necessarily as much as
they were so
did.
polite.
They're just smarter. That's what it is.
That's absolutely true. Yes. So, I guess we should let's discuss why this matters, because on paper, and logically speaking, living longer can only be a good thing, and so therefore we shouldn't have to worry about it, right?
Yeah. In theory, the longer you live, cool. More years to experience life and accomplish things, and we'll talk about this at the very end, but if you have a purpose, more opportunity to fulfill that. But how you live in those later years matters. And so if you plan for living to age 85, because that's what the Social Security Administration says, and you actually live to be 100, those 15 years, if you don't have the money, will not be very enjoyable. If you're in poverty and there's, you're not able to do and live in the places you want to.
Or afford care to be healthy.
So that's why it matters. And so when you're planning is to help, really the main purpose of retirement planning is to help you determine how long do you need to work? How much do you need to save while you're working? And then how long do you need to plan for those funds to last? So really those three big high-level pieces are what a good financial planner is factoring in, because those are the ones you have the most control over. Notice I didn't talk about returns in the market or anything. You don't have control over that. The market does what the market does. But you have control over how much you spend. You have control over how much you save. And you have a pretty good amount of control over how long you work. Now, there's health and other unforeseeable things that could show up, but in general, you at least have that decision, to have an income earned for the most part. And so those are the ones you need to focus on, because those are the things you can adapt and adjust. Right. How long you're going to live matters, because that spending is huge, right? If, you save $1 million and you're only going to live 5 years, you know how much you could spend each year to make that work.
Right.
But if the unknown, which is everybody's life, is if I have $1 million, I don't know how long I need to make this last. I need to find something that's sustainable regardless of that time frame. That's where the retirement planning comes in.
There's really two ways to look at this, right? You could not have enough money and then run out of money and live longer than you are expecting, or the other way around, you could have plenty of money and leftover money and not live as long as your retirement plan would then be built for. So which way is a better way to approach it? And I think that's a rhetorical question, but go ahead and go into why you think planning for the worst is maybe the better option.
Planning for the worst.
Yeah, that's a hard way to put it.
The worst case scenario for a plan is you live a long time.
Exactly.
And that's good for everybody around you, your loved ones.
It costs a lot more money.
It costs more. Healthcare costs are more. Your rent, your utilities, your food, everything you have, it costs a lot more. And so when you're planning, you need to plan for at least the higher frequency events. A lot of planners are using somewhere between 90 and 100 right now. Right. Because that's, again, 1 in 7 are going to get there. So it's not like everybody you're planning for is going to get there, but there's a chance, and so we got to plan for it. And then the other piece of it too is when you look at your assets, if you have a pension or some sort of income that's going to go the rest of your life, then you can adjust those plans accordingly, because you at least have that baseline. Social Security is another example of that. Social Security is going to last your whole life. Now, we can debate all that on whether Social Security will still be around, but in general, it's set up for, it's not going to stop after X amount of years.
Right.
It's going to pay out your whole life. So you can have that as kind of your baseline. That's my minimal income I'm going to have if I have a pension, that on top of it, or anything like that, rental income, anything like that. But then everything else, you got to say, okay, how long do I want to assume I'm going to need these assets for? Sometimes you may plan for not touching certain assets. For instance, you may have a home, and you may have it paid off by the time you get to retirement, which is a lot of people's goal is to be debt-free in retirement. So that's an asset with value that maybe you don't plan for at all in your retirement. So worst case scenario, at the end, there's ways of getting equity out of your home that you could use to prolong your ability to spend. So those are but in general, the better way to plan is to plan for a long life, because the worst case scenario in that instance is you have leftover money that you can then designate for legacy, for giving, for whatever you want. So that's not a bad situation to be in for your family.
Gotcha.
So that's retirement planning, right? We want to make sure we factor at least. So why don't I do 150 just to be safe? Well,
really
then
safe.
At that point, you're leaving on the table probably a lot of money you could be spending or working a lot longer than you need to for a very, very low probability. So it really just factors in, okay, what does my family history look like? How do I feel? Do I have any underlying conditions that maybe it would impact my longevity? And you just have to decide what gives me the most peace of mind. What target should I shoot for? Maybe it's 100. Who knows? A lot, like I said, 95 seems to be kind of the standard because, again, that 1 in 7 get to that 95-ish piece, right? I should point out, we're talking about that statistics. A married couple, when you combine the two and you look at it as what if just at least one of you makes it there, you actually have a higher probability of one of the two making it. Again, going back to just how statistics work, either one of you combined have a better chance of one of you making it. So again, you want to be a little more conservative that way.
Exactly.
So that's retirement planning.
Oh, it's the best.
It's good, but that's huge, because it affects how long you want to work, what do you have to save, all that. The other piece of it is when it comes to claiming Social Security, having a estimate or guess on how long you think you're going to live helps in determining when you should claim it. Because the way Social Security works is at 62, and this is current law because they can always change or adapt this, but at 62 is the minimum age you can claim Social Security. At that point, you're actually claiming a reduced Social Security amount, meaning a lower Social Security amount than what you've actually earned. At your full retirement age, which is currently at 67 for most people, it's based on your birth date is what your full retirement age is, and they are actually slowly moving that upward because that's one of the pieces they're doing to Social Security to help stretch it out. But at your full retirement age, you get the total amount that you've contributed in based on their formula. That's your full Social Security amount at that full retirement age. If you decide not to claim it then, you can wait up till age 70, which is, again, the current tax law. Up to age 70, you actually get a bonus or an increase in your Social Security payment. So, well, why doesn't everybody do that? Well, because you're delaying those monthly payments from 62 to 70, there's an 8-year window in there. Anytime you claim in there, every year you wait, you have to, in a sense, catch up for that unreceived amount.
Right.
But since you're getting a higher amount, you will catch there.
Yep.
What is that age? And that's kind of the break-even age to say, is it worth waiting because I'm going to get more total by waiting? And so most people, if you wait till age 70 instead of claim at full retirement age, you have to get into your 80s to make that worthwhile. Yeah. So going back to the Social Security, there's a reason why that works. The Social Security Administration knows the average life expectancy is the mid-80s. So they're just kind of playing those numbers to kind of give people an incentive to say, hey, if you think you're above average in life expectancy, you may want to wait. You're going to get more money.
We all know you're above average, Josh.
In life expectancy, who knows?
So what's a couple more factors after Social Security that really go into why planning for longer life expectancies matter?
Yeah. So the other one, which I touched on briefly, is healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
So the longer,
we talk about it every episode.
It's a huge cost, especially when it comes to retirement planning. Now, there's Medicare. Medicare is for anybody 65 and older. That's not free. You have to pay for portions of Medicare, and Medicare does not cover everything, so you have to get supplemental insurance. So those are costs that even retirees are facing, and the longer you live, the more those cost. And statistically speaking, again, the older you are, the more portion of your overall spending is towards healthcare. Just as your body's getting older, there's more and more issues you have to take care of. And so that's one piece. That's the longer you live, the more costs will be there. The other aspect is long-term care, meaning not health care, but if I need to be in a facility or have someone there to help take care of me, that's on top of your health care. In fact, Medicare really does not cover long-term care expenses. They have some things built in for like rehabilitation and stuff, but there's really not long-term care
that's
building.
more on the Medicaid side of things.
And Medicaid only kicks in if you've depleted all your other assets.
Right.
And that's kind of the safety net piece. But yes, they do have long-term care coverage there. But long-term care is expensive, and the longer you live, the higher probability you're probably going to use it at some point because, at certain ages you just have a hard time taking care of yourself and you need help. So those are the pieces you have to factor in as well, that the longer I'm going to live, there's maybe a better chance I'm going to need some sort of planning to help take care of those expenses. There is long-term care insurance out there that you can buy, and there's all different types. I think we did an episode on some of that. And so those are all things that you can look into. There's now hybrid ones, all this fun stuff. Or if you're self-funding, you make sure you have enough money kind of earmarked for long-term care and set aside for that matter.
So you mentioned
costs
that
a lot.
We probably have an episode about that.
Yeah, I can
probably being the key, because now that we've done 100, they're all kind of running together.
Yes.
So we're hitting on things we've hit on before, and we're going to continue to do this forever. So, Josh, while you're confirming that, I know we do have a long-term care episode.
I'm sure
some disability.
We did disability.
I think we did that too. We'll link that in the show notes if that is the case. But I have a dad joke of the week for you.
All right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's r/dad jokes. Reddit. Cracks me up.
That's your thing.
All right. Why are bakers so rich?
They have a lot of dough.
Yeah, they make so much dough.
Oh, man.
They make a lot, but do you know they need even more?
So we were just on a trip, and there was a food truck.
KNEAD.
And the food truck, it was a pizza food truck.
Okay.
And it said, buy our pizza, we need the dough.
KNEAD.
Yeah, we need the dough, but they also need the dough. See,
good.
it's just a spelling thing.
Oh,
it's
man.
hilarious.
Puns are great. So that's your dad joke of the week, brought to you by Reddit.
Nice.
So this is where I get a little nerdy, okay? So we've talked about people are living longer and people are expected to live longer. That is the key there. But we should probably explain why people are living longer. And there's a number of reasons. There's actually a ton of reasons, and I'm going to name a handful that we're going to talk about. So number one, hygiene is a big difference of why people are living longer than they used to, and really longer than they really ever have. In modern history, anyway. So, number one, hand washing. It has increased greatly since the 1800s, especially in the medical field, and that has decreased the chances of infections stemming from unwanted germs during medical procedures, or specifically from births. That's how a lot of the infant deaths occurred, in older history, 1800s or before, is when children were being born, they were not being, the doctors were not super clean. Now that is not the case.
Yes.
It's high standards for that. And that, early age deaths has brought up the life expectancy averages as well. So that's a factor in that. Another one is clean drinking water. That's something that's become more common around the world. We take it for granted here, but it's becoming more common around the world. And unclean water often contains parasites and such that can be really detrimental to your health. It's a big problem in third world countries. Yes. It's a huge problem in places like Africa. So that is something that it's on the rise around the world, which is great, but we've been blessed to have that for a long, long time here.
Yep. And you talked about, being born, and the longer you live, the longer your life expectancy is, which sounds counterintuitive.
Right.
But an infant born here in the United States, their life expectancy is only in the 70s, just because you take early deaths into account during that. But if you get to your 60s, then your life expectancy is 85. So if you can get through certain periods, they actually extend your life
there's
expectancy.
Probably like a peak, right?
Yeah. And again, but if you get to 85, your life expectancy is moved forward. So that's kind of how it works,
Absolutely.
Which is just weird to think about. But anyway.
Another factor is running water, building on the water theme. So running water, flushing toilets, they've become commonplace. And that one of the key things that does, not to be TMI, but that removes human solid waste. And human solid waste contains microbes, and those microbes cause disease. So if you're doing your business into a pit and all that microbe stuff get in the air, that's not great.
Or into water.
It's not great, yeah. Or in the streets. Sewage used to be in the streets and stuff like that. That's not the case anymore.
Gross.
It's a great thing. It used to be gross. It's less gross. Still gross. Bonus. I read this somewhere.
Yes.
If you flush the toilet with the lid down, you actually cut down even further on the microbes entering the air, and it's by 50 or 70%.
It's a pretty big deal.
So
close that lid.
Close that lid. Another reason people are living longer is genetic studies. So as of 2003, we have a pretty good understanding of human genetics. The Human Genome Project started in 1990, wrapped up in 2003, and now allows experts to understand how humans work and, just the human genome more than ever. And that is allowing us to make great advances in the medical field. Another one is an increased focus on health and fitness.
Yep.
So people are going to the doctor for routine exams more frequently, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And this allows things like cancer to be caught more early and treated earlier before it gets too bad or spreads too far. That's a big difference than it used to be. A lot of those things, life expectancy issues from the early 1900s or the 1800s or before, these people could have been dying from cancer or whatever. We had no idea. They were just dying.
Yeah.
So this is a big difference. Another one is people are just interested in being more active. So from 2000 to 2019, the number of gym memberships in the United States doubled from 32.9 million to 64.2 million, according to Statista. So big interest in that, and that has changed a little bit by going to subscriptions and doing it on TV or a Peloton or whatever since the pandemic started, but it still has increased a lot.
Yep.
Another big factor is that less people smoke. You mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, we've all seen Mad Men, and if you haven't, you should. It's a great show. But yeah, that was an example of the office environment in the 60s.
They were probably all mad because
they were all mad. Everyone was smoking and drinking all the time.
Jacket all the time.
So less people smoke. It's no secret that smoking kills and shortens lifespans, and the numbers are getting better. They're not great. Some people still choose to do that. In 2005, 21% of the population smoked. In the 50s and 60s, that was like way higher than that.
Kids were smoking. It's crazy.
They're like born smoking. But now it's down to 14%. So that's 7% in 15 years or so.
Good.
So that's working in the right direction, and that's helping people live longer because the statistics for smoking individuals versus non-smoking individuals, it's huge at life expectancy and lifetimes. Another factor is that people are focusing on healthy eating. So everyone's definition of healthy, I'm using air quotes in a podcast, is different. That's everyone has their own opinion on that. But in general, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they've greatly increased the ingredient and nutrition fact label requirements on foods over time, and they're pretty robust now. You can pick up anything and see what's in it, which helps people to be able to choose what they believe are healthier options in a lot of instances and have more well-balanced meals.
Speaking of a well-balanced meal, when my wife and I were just traveling, we were in Austin, Texas.
Great name.
Yes. And there was a restaurant, and they had bread pudding, which is good. I don't know if you ever had bread pudding. It's good. They made the bread pudding with, this town's called Round Rock. They have donuts there that are, in my opinion, better than Krispy Kreme donuts. But at the same time, like those really nice glazed,
the yeast.
like really light and fluffy.
Yep.
But they made the bread pudding out of the Round Rock donuts.
And?
Oh, man. It's good.
You didn't bring me back any.
It didn't.
It didn't
make it out of the table. There was no leftovers.
That sounds delicious.
Yes. So well-balanced meal.
Well-balanced, mostly heavy on the donuts. And yeah, so those are a lot of the main reasons that people are living longer. A lot of it just goes to healthcare around the world has just, in the last 100 years, we've learned so much. We can treat things so much better and prevent things. So everything's working in the right direction there. But the question you might ask me, Josh.
I'm going to ask you this question.
How?
How should they invest in this?
Well, should is relative.
Should
that's a different question, but
you'll ask me that one later.
I'm going to say, no, I'm just going to go ahead and hit the nail on the head now. None of these are coming up are recommendations of what you should buy because everyone's situation and goals are different. Talk to your advisor about the situation. If you don't have one, hey, you can talk to us. We would be happy to talk to you. There's an Invest With Us tab on our website. You can talk to Josh, the famous Josh Robb, about your situation. But specific companies, there's our ETFs and stuff in some of these spaces, but I'm looking at specific companies in some of these industries we talked about. So there is an ETF for clean water, and it's a First Trust ETF.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty cool. There's a company called Middlesex Water Company, which is a Northeast United States clean water company. That's a kind of like utility. Going on to a different theme, Illumina is a company that focuses on genetic sequencing, and that's a healthcare company that does a lot of innovation there. Focusing on the fitness side of things, you got Planet Fitness, Peloton, and Apple. They focus on health and fitness. Thinking about food, Amazon owns Whole Foods, so Amazon's a stock there. Kroger sells a lot of that. Costco and Walmart, they sell a lot of healthy options, healthy foods. And kind of going to your long-term care discussion, there's a REIT, or real estate investment trust, called Welltower.
Yes.
And that Welltower REIT is a company that focuses on long-term care facilities, kind of elderly focused, places. So that is a unique.
They own the properties that these are at. That's
they're not necessarily handling the medical side of it, but they're handling the real estate side of it. And that's an interesting option there. So again, none of those are recommendations. Talk to your advisor.
All right. So talked about why it matters in retirement.
Oh, it matters.
We talked about why investing in it could make sense based on your situation, your goals. And one final thing is when we're talking about this, living longer, and especially having a longer retirement period, because that's really what's happening here, is people are still retiring about the same time frame, but they're living longer, is you need to have a sense of purpose. And that's really what drives, and research has shown that in retirement, you need to keep your body and your mind active to have a healthy and successful retirement. And so we just recently had a podcast where Tony Hickson, one of the founders of the firm we work at, he had just written a book, and his book focuses on having purpose in retirement. So I strongly encourage you to check that podcast out. If you haven't listened to it yet, check that one out. It's a really good one. And then you check his book out. It is available now for purchase. You can get any information you need at tonyhickson.com. We'll also link that in our show notes as well. But that's just one thing to think about. Austin, your turn. How can people help us?
Changing it up this week.
I know.
So first of all, we would love it if you would subscribe, because we put out episodes every single Thursday, and we'd love it if you would listen to those, because we haven't missed one yet. We're 100 in.
100. Woo.
Number 2, if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, as most of our listeners do, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us to show up in search results, and we're hoping to get onto some of those recommended pages.
Cool.
One of those days, that'd be great. Number 3, email us any ideas that you have for episodes that you would like us to talk about, questions you've got, topics you'd like discussed. Email us at hello@theinvesteddads.com, and we would love to hear from you. We do read every email that is sent in.
Even the spam.
Even the spam ones, those get
I don't
deleted,
know why
but
I
we
do.
do read them.
I don't know why I read them, but I do read them.
Yep. Number 4, if you know someone who is asking, hey, how long should I plan for retirement? Or
if you know somebody who is 100.
If you know someone's 100.
And they listen to podcasts.
Then this is a great niche for them. But share this episode with anyone that you feel like would enjoy it or benefit from it. Well, Josh, until next Thursday, we're going to sign off
with 101.
With 101 next week. And we're going to keep chugging these things along. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. And we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.